All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for
Oregairu, Season 1, Episode 3. We had a Chunibyo writer last episode.
Yes, we did. It hit too close to home at points, and it was, it was good.
And
yes.
I salute you, sir. Yes. Continue your work with your writing and whatnot, and
survive.
Yes, survive, right. And take that editing feedback and stuff and incorporate it.
Yes.
But it's gonna get a lot worse because those were mostly grammar edits. So
right. I feel like he, every once in a while when he's like about to write, he like kneels like Dark Souls wise, like offers himself to the bonfire that is the computer, and then like the Skull Knight like raises from the bonfire in his mind and just goes, "Struggle on."
Right. Probably.
That's what his mind like is occupied there in that regard.
And that's something where that kind of thing is a showcasing of how, you know, his Chunibyo self can be of benefit, you know?
It really can.
Because there are situations where that can be the case, you know? Sometimes you need to push a door open or whatever, you know, when you go to the grocery store.
Yeah, this guy needs to like get into D&D. That's
he really
just
does.
Straight up what needs to
I get the feeling he would okay, maybe he wouldn't make a good dungeon master.
Maybe not a good dungeon master.
He would have a lot of fun as a player.
Right. If anything, he might need to be reined in a bit as
potentially
as a player too.
Yeah.
But we are also getting teased another character from the previous episode's ending. So let's see where that leads.
Yep.
We had some good stuff with Yui in the previous episode
Wonderful.
as well. So this show has just done its characters really well. Let's hope that continues like all the way into whatever comes next. So, y'all, without further ado, let's get into this. All right, everyone, now be sure to go check out the reaction portion of the video in the description below, then come back here for the discussion. All right.
This was a really good episode.
This was a fun episode to have the typical shtick of now we have the awkward dynamic of the in crowd of popular people fight in the sport impromptu game against the loser crowd, if you will.
Right.
And then the loser crowd shows them up because one of them has amazing skills, but also the one who shouldn't necessarily have the skills does something clever that teaches them a lesson, and thus all the tropes were finally displayed. But then we get the bloody amazing execution of how these characters interacted throughout this, and then the contemplative like inner dialogue or monologuing with
Hachiman. Yeah, because like this episode, right? And I wouldn't have been surprised. Excuse me. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was just sort of the tennis match and the things like that, and the direct conflicts with the in crowd, essentially, right? That would have been totally fine, right?
Yeah.
And it still, by proximity, it still would have characterized our main cast because we would have seen how they interacted with them.
Yep.
But there were a lot of things that made it more than that, because
there's like a setup.
Yeah, there was the whole setup. There was the conversation with Yui at the beginning. You know, there was Hachiman's whole sort of internal thoughts on things, and also the way that he specifically addressed this in crowd, because it was anything but passive.
Yeah. If anything, we're already starting to see the little bits of where his desire to engage in these kind of social dynamics has risen tremendously because of the teacher, pushing him to be a part of the service club in this regard. So it's working. It's working really well. We got to meet a new character this episode.
Yes, Sai.
Sai, yeah, or Totsuka, as would be more the formal name, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I might have over-characterized them out the gate, but I'm not exactly sure, because one of the things that was consistent throughout the episode was that everything that Sai did brought about
an outcome
that was based on the original intent of what they stated when they came to the service club.
Sure.
Was help make the tennis club better.
Right.
And even if that's just making him better at tennis, it's something that doesn't necessarily have to be one that was accidental in that it all ended up going that way.
And it's sort of that additional reinforcement of the thing that Hachiman is constantly looking at of the people that have things tend to sort of just go their way because they're popular, because they're, whatever, because there's something about them maybe where they're able to get the things that they want and there you go, right?
And exploit an advantage of sorts.
Exactly, right. Even if they don't realize they're doing it. Like with the Hayato guy where it's when you played baseball as a kid, how many people did you play with? And he's like, well, 18 is pretty usual, right? And he's like, I had to play by myself, like, and there's a lot of like, as much as Miss Mean Girl, had the whole snake motif, right? When he went to stand up to her, there's some venom to the things that Hachiman has been saying because there's a lot of pain behind those statements, and it's like, even to the point where the guy was like, where's this coming from? Like this, like, okay, I thought I was being rather nice and civil and just like, hey, like this will be great, No, it came from a whole lot of things that he hadn't seen. And we also haven't fully seen. We've gotten hints of it. We've heard of it, but it keeps getting unpacked.
And this is not just necessarily the potentially like game-changing event that happened apparently at the entrance ceremony.
The traffic accident or
traffic accident, something that even Yui remembers with a bit of like hesitation and her wanting to bring it up when it might not exactly correlate to just the accident. It might be that there was an accident that happened, but then there were some consequences of that led to something else happening, or there was some other stuff that was just brought about as a result of that. So there's some things that they can unpack there.
Or were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that we'll be basically watching Hachiman to see what kind of things trigger that being brought up in the future.
And one of the things that I loved about how they brought this up in the episode is that his response of, hey, I didn't have stuff like that, and that upsets me. He's open and honest about that, right? He even tells the people, which I was not expecting, right?
That was the self-deprecating strategy that he uses.
Right. Yeah. And it's something where, so, even, like bowing and all of that stuff, he's like, this is how I hold on to my pride by doing the things that I know you guys wouldn't want to do because you guys don't have to do.
Right.
I'll still do that because that's the kind of person that I am, right?
Right.
But then Yui also brought up like, hey, all this in-crowd, out-crowd stuff, but when you and Yukino are talking, there's not a lot of room for me to, say anything.
Right.
And I love that because it's something, there's a bunch of layers to the characterization there, right? It's characterization for Hachiman because, yes, he does do that, even though he says all these things about the in-crowd people.
Right.
There's the fact that then it's being brought up to him, right? So that's something that he will now have to think about. Then there's the fact that Yui is the one bringing it up to him because she was always the one that wouldn't stand up for herself, things like that. You're my only friend I can rely on when she's talking to Yukino, right? It's showing that she's getting in a better place with better friendships so that she can actually be free and bring concerns up like that.
Right.
And she doesn't, and it's not something where she's like hesitant to do it. She just brings it up casually, right? It's not something that she had to like work her courage up to, It was just a comment, an observation.
Yeah. I loved the observation that she made that for both Yukino and Hachiman, that they have a closed off nature to them that keeps her at bay. Because I've had instances where I couldn't understand what was going on, but basically there would be language used by people I knew in my past where I would literally have to go and have like therapy talks with like people who are older and wiser and be like, I don't understand what they're doing. It's kind of like the thing of where there's a social group, right? And say you have 6 of them, and there would be these two that would be really socially adept in the way that they would speak and stuff. And when I would try to chime in, they would always basically have a bit of a comment on my thing that I would try to say that would basically give a diffusal kind of aspect to the thing that I would say, so that whenever I would try to speak up and kind of have some
sort of a
influence
putting you down.
Yeah, exactly. But it was something that would never actually look like putting you down unless you were the one experiencing it directly.
Yes.
So to everyone else, it wasn't an issue. And I didn't necessarily get like immediately upset at all of them for not like kind of sticking up for me. I was like, well, no, this is my responsibility. How can I stick up for myself? And yet it would be a thing where I would notice how they wouldn't do it as much with other people. But
know your place in the social hierarchy kind of thing.
Right. It was basically like there would be someone that would be chosen in every group dynamic of the conversation to be basically the least in the dynamic.
Right, the omega sort of.
Yeah. Right. So they would get completely shut down by everyone in some ways.
Yeah.
Now, there'd be times where someone would have a little bit of a I don't know, some kind of a protector's mentality. So they would kind of be like, "Oh, let them finish.
Hold on,
let them talk." But sometimes they would be doing that just to make themselves feel better because they were aware of what was going on.
And they didn't do it. There were times when they didn't do it. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's something that on some level I've had to make sure I don't, over the course of like time, take that on myself and end up doing that subconsciously because of how much it happened to me during some specific years. It was a roommate that did this to me a lot. So it was like 2 whole years.
Yeah, it's like
of like, really.
Oh man, that's rough. Like because if it was someone where it's like, okay, you don't hang out with them that much, then it's like, okay, maybe you just, sort of stop hanging out with them,
I basically
right?
did, though. After about 6 months of, generally just kind of convenience hanging out because they were roommates and stuff, I just stopped hanging out with them. Like, I just avoided them entirely. And it sucked because there were 2 friends that he was close to that were also my friends.
That you ended up hanging out with way less because of it?
I ended up hanging out with extremely less because of that, because I wasn't as socially adept to be able to bring them in on a lot of things that I would do.
Right.
And it was like, it was a thing. Like, it was a thing. So it's very important to realize this, especially in one-on-one dynamics with Yui and Hachiman, because Yui doesn't have anyone standing up for her in this case there, or to give a second opinion on this. So she's like, whoa, let me get involved on this here. This is important.
And because of the nature of how it works, it's not even something that she probably felt like she could bring up in the moment when those sorts of things happen. It's the afterwards being like, well, hey, and since it's relevant here.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it wasn't even something where she was like, hey, I feel like, I've been kind of being, like, pushed out. Because in a lot of ways, she's gotten so used to that she doesn't immediately strongly question it, you know?
Yeah.
But then it's like, when, Hachiman is sort of waxing about that topic, it's like, well, now that you bring it up, I'll bring this other thing up that's very similar,
Yeah. You know, that it actually just kind of makes me almost want to double down on my immediate kind of assumptions, or based on my thoughts about Sai, is that Hachiman kind of did the same thing that Sai was doing, if that was what Sai was doing, this whole episode. Was basically kind of conditioning those around him in very subtle ways to make sure that the scenarios and environments that Hachiman was in were safer. Right. It wasn't that he was trying to make people say yes to him.
Sometimes he was.
Yeah, sometimes he was, but it was a different kind of yes. It was basically saying, I don't want aggression from you. I don't want some kind of way that you can control me. I don't want to give you anything so that you can then basically connect with me.
And in fact, I'll sort of preemptively do these things that cut myself off because I don't want you to be able to control me, which is sort of an indirect, reverse control.
It is. It totally is. And that's why I almost immediately picked up on it from the Sai angle, because Sai was doing this in a much more subtle way, in that it feels genuine a lot of the time.
And it probably is, like, you know,
That's
from
the
Sai's
thing.
perspective.
It very much
you know?
could be. But the end result is that it is I would say, a more accepted form of immaturity.
Okay.
In a social dynamic.
So counter thought perspective, you know, et cetera. Because I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure hachiman often will comment on the sort of social dynamics as a jungle. Right? And then sort of there's the alpha social predator kind of thing, right? In these kinds of situations, because his response very much seems to be, since this is a social jungle, even if I'm as the Omega, even if I'm sort of designated a scavenger rather than a carnivore, or rather than like a true hunter. It's not
binary, dude. There's a spectrum.
It is not binary, but that's something where he responds within that same sort of perspective because he sees it as being a jungle, so he responds as if it's a jungle, right? And
I feel like that was a little bit of tautology, but can you, bring your...
But in Sai's case, is this something where if they don't see it as being that because it hasn't been too much of a glaring issue for them in the positive or the negative, right, then they're just sort of navigating this social space, you know, and doing all the little things to negotiate things from their environment and people in their environment. But the
negotiations
thing is
are usually given you make the other person clear, like, hey, can we negotiate on this?
Sure.
These are all things that don't have social contracts associated with them.
But people do that all the time.
That's my point, though, is that it is an accepted form of immaturity.
Well, but is it actually a form of immaturity?
No, not necessarily. I would say that in some ways you could say that if you replaced this dynamic with someone that was conventionally attractive to you, you were very much attracted to them, and they would do things in their body language and such to basically, encourage you to say yes to whatever their request would be. It is manipulation. It's just we're not going into intent here. Right. Because we can't know the intent of a person.
Sure.
They're another person. So in that respect, I would say that if someone is wanting basically a certain, response, and then gets at the angle of it with some kind of strategy to get them to say yes. Is that just clever utilization of your resources and thus has no, there's no moral question of it at all? Or is it different based on what they're requesting?
Sure. Like, I think that's definitely something that is probably the case because I feel like when I think of all the times that I or other people that I've seen, do this just as a means of survival and integration, where like into society, into people groups and things like that,
Interesting.
Like when you say like, hey, does everybody want to go to, like get some Chipotle or something like that, right?
Okay.
Like that's essentially a, when you bring that up, you'll try and bring it up in the way that makes it seem like Chipotle, they had that issue a while back, but you wanna go get some Chipotle, like people don't do that. They'll try and present it as
I'm with you.
A positive thing,
but
right?
Isn't that based in a fear of rejection primarily?
Potentially, but in the situation of the manipulative connotations, that feels like it's something where it's when someone is doing something for which the other person is not able to properly contribute or respond or play in that line of things. So like, when someone's
that's too binary again, though.
Well, maybe, but like, so in the situation of someone where they're like, they think, like, if you think someone has a crush on you, right, and then you try and use that to get them to do stuff, that's not cool, right? Because
that's intent.
Well, okay.
Isn't that?
Okay, sure. And to bring it back to the episode, I guess, in this situation, hachiman is probably... He's not necessarily assuming intent, but because he sees this game that he feels like he isn't properly able to play, much like tennis.
Yeah, he's completely against the game in general. And yet he does play the game.
And he does play the game.
Plays advantage to him.
Right.
So because we have the perfect perspective on him, because we can see inside his head, we can tell when he's abusing the system for his own gain, and thus we can kind of be like, "Ooh, buddy, we can see the character flaw
Yeah,
a little
but-
bit more obviously. But this is maybe just a topic that I'm a little bit biased strongly against, like a little bit biased strongly. No, I'm pretty biased against this.
Right.
But I see a large portion of that as just being different scales of manipulation, where it's
Gotcha.
a very, very fear-based response for the purpose of survival, yes. But when you think about the kinds of things that are being asked, it is not on a survival level. It is very small things in terms of the importance of it and the scale of it. It is not whether or not you'll live or die. It is not
Right.
whether or not you're going to experience love or not, you know. It is I'd like, you know, a slightly better experience with tennis
Gotcha.
and stuff, even though it's something that's really important to Sai. It's not necessarily opening up as much as it is just kind of setting up the other person. Be
Okay.
like, I'd really like some help. You
Yeah,
know?
I see that.
I don't know.
For me, I see the world as being a lot more like transactional, you know, where like even in the case of like trying to get someone to do something for you, you know, and the sort of the things that you try and do to make them say yes, it's sort of here's a benefit that I'll give you that might be a benefit in a different area, different you know,
And that's why I
avenue.
use the word negotiation.
Right,
a lot.
negotiation,
Gotcha.
yeah. So that way you will see it as being beneficial for you enough to do this thing that I need you to do.
Right.
You know, it's you know, in its purest form, it's the, you know, buying groceries, right? You know,
Totally.
I need food. I don't want to actually hunt and gather it myself. So,
Right.
you know, here's this thing.
Right. So what I would love to discuss more as this show goes on, because I'm sure they're going to get into this more.
Oh, yeah,
at some
because
point.
they really teasing it from a bunch of different angles this episode.
But that is that I think a lot of people judge the manipulation based on what they're wanting, not on the manipulation itself. So there's that's what my point was, that there's societally accepted forms of manipulation that I think are not okay.
Yeah,
just personally.
the baby making a cute face and
That's
being like,
literally-
"Can I have a cookie?" And it's
That's
like,
literally-
"Aw, okay."
No, that's
Yeah.
literally manipulation. I think that's a great pure way to say it, is that when the baby talks to the parent and is like, I want a thing, and you're looking at them and you're like, they're so cute. But I know what they're doing.
Right.
They are trying to condition me to say yes.
Yes.
So, do you look at that and go, well, the thing that they're asking for isn't that big of a deal? Or do you look at this and go, do I want to reinforce the behavior that if they do a specific set of things in a certain way, I will say yes, that's just a thing that I do?
It's also, but on another angle, it's reinforcing that, hey, you understood the benefits and
Right,
privileges and
it's
such and resources that you have at your disposal in order to make a person see value in something.
Sure.
You know, I gave you this little endorphin rush by striking that adorable pose.
Yes.
Can I have a cookie?
Right.
You
An
know.
example of that in this episode that was different but worked the same way was when Yui went to ask Yukino for help with the tennis match. She called Yukino her friend multiple times. And Yukino was like, okay,
Yeah, right.
sure.
And couldn't even say that she was her friend back. Now, of course, that's Yukino's whole, you know,
Right.
Ice Queen reservation
Right.
kind of thing.
But Yukino also wasn't even told why she was brought out here in the first place. Yui asked her to change into clothes, brought her out here without saying why. So it is a thing that, I'll just say, they teach you this in sales. Literally, they teach you this in sales. Ask the people to say yes to smaller things.
Yep.
And then ask them to say yes to the big thing after they've said yes to like 4 or 5 other little things.
Right.
This is just a social thing that people accept that I just personally have, maybe because of a lot of my internal fears as a person, I really dislike when this is used as the primary way that people, you know, want someone to say yes to
Gotcha.
things. However, I also accept, I just want to concede this, that it is necessary under certain circumstances.
Sure.
And it is important to understand that while I am kind of saying rah against the binary aspect of this, and whether it's right or wrong, or whether, you know, it is manipulation or it's not manipulation.
Is there a better system? You know,
Well, right, but I'm also then potentially kind of getting a little bit binary and black and white here by how I'm judging this. So it is something that needs to be everything in context, in moderation, and looking at things from an angle that gives the other person, at the very least, the benefit of the doubt that their intent is genuine.
And
don't get into judging intent. That's where it gets weird.
And if you want to get whack with it, even the things in bringing up the potential issues with the system of doing things is kind of also playing within that system of, hey, there are these potential issues, that creates an emotional response when, we think about things like that and whatnot. Shouldn't they be different, right?
Nice.
One of my favorite things though with like the whole thing with Yui, because I totally didn't think about the whole friend thing. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
In my mind, one of the ways that you know that you're really good friends with somebody is when that starts to happen. But the thing is, it happens from both sides, right? And the problem, and that's why I think.
Wait. What is that?
The
when they don't butter you up, basically, is what you're talking about. When they just say like, "Hey, let's go do this." Get in, losers, we're going shopping.
right, exactly. Get in, losers, we're going shopping. Yui being like, "Hey, I need you to change into this outfit," and like come play tennis, and bring your A game, right?
Yeah.
And in the bad situation, when it's one-sided, we get situations like Yui's other like friend group, right? Where it's the bossing around, it's the social bullying kind of a thing, right? But that's because it's out of balance, right? If it's balanced, then you can have this thing where it has that give and take. There's, and I think that's the main thing that Hachiman is frustrated by, is that he sees these situations where because certain people don't have certain talents, gifts, whatever, they don't have the skill sets to be able to properly compete in this jungle where the other sides often aren't really concerned of whether there is a balance in the give and take.
Sure.
It's just a take. And because no one fully objects, it just sort of keeps happening because there's no particularly strong reason to stop it.
Right. For them, everything's working out.
It just
Why would I
works,
stop this?
And because people tend to see the things that they do from the best light and then things that other people do in the worst light, or at least in the most critical light, then they excuse themselves because it's, like with the whole thing of, hey, no, it's fine. More the merrier. It'll be great. And then it's like, no, hold on. There's something else that's kind of happening here that you probably don't realize, right? And
definitely.
And how is Hachiman going to grow in developing his own skills within that regard so that he can have those meaningful connections with people, right? And not just be voting himself off the island completely. And also come to terms with the very strong feelings surrounding this subject that he has.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that.
I think they've nailed the character writing in this show in ways that I hope I'm not building it up too much.
Like in your own head.
In my own head, Because I think I'm bringing in a lot into this that might end up overlapping too much with what's actually going on in the plot.
Okay.
But within just the first episode, I think we basically were told what kind of level of character depth we're actually going to be getting into here, which is quite a bit. But we also had a lot of funny moments this episode.
We did.
I loved how the Chunibyo buddy of Hachiman
just shows up.
Zaimokuza, I believe that was his name.
Yep.
He had a couple nicknames and things like that. So to bear with us while we hone in on what his actual name is, if that has already been revealed yet.
I think Hachiman actually started referencing him in his head of like, I should teach Zamakuza this. And it's like, oh, okay. So Zamakuza wasn't just making up that, like, that's additional confirmation that, yes, they were / maybe still are friends, sort of.
Oh, I think they are.
Right.
In a lot of ways, except that it's a thing of where it's like, no, don't mention this in public.
Right, exactly.
We're trying to survive out here,
Like every time he came in when Hachiman was trying to like do the whole social sparring and stuff with the in crowd, and he was giving his commentary, it was just like, oh my god, you are you have the best intentions, bro, but I don't think he sees you as helping right now.
But naming the moves though, that was fantastic.
Yep.
I loved how we basically got Yukino throwing even more shade towards Mean Girl.
Ice Queen indeed.
Yeah, and she did it so well. I really do think that one of my favorite flaws within Yukino is because of her past, she has a chip on her shoulder.
Yeah.
For anyone else that has even a remote semblance of this kind of power dynamic or what have you, because she shifted into, oh, you're the enemy? Cool.
Right.
I won't even try to destroy you. I just will casually obliterate you.
Paladins, they're awesome when they're on your side, and you're like, wow, you're amazing.
Yeah.
When they're not, you're like,
they're not. Their auras are going
terrifying
to other people, and their smites are coming to your face.
Right.
So you best
be prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
And she mentioned how it was like she was channeling her own past issues, where it's like the way they're talking, it's just like those people that used to harass me. Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, this is easy now. Yep. I loved that we had Hachiman using some clever callbacks to stuff that was happening in the episode to figure out a way to defeat them with the final point. That was really cool. I really liked how much kind of mental journaling it seems like that we go through with Hachiman, but specifically in this episode, we got a lot of it just throughout the episode as a whole. And a couple moments like that, you almost could feel that it was for him. When someone hold on. Let's just take us as regular people. When you are having your own self-talk, you kind of talk some ways in which you kind of want to be... Well, no, I'm not going to make the assumption here. But basically, I personally don't have that eloquent of self-talk. So I almost wonder if this is some aspect of his own... Ego having issues with the fact that when he talks out loud to people, he's not able to do it that well at points. So every time he's talking to himself, it's like he's been practicing for those moments that he gets to speak out loud. And yet, he doesn't always nail that execution 100%.
He doesn't always. It's he does all of this practicing, and this is something where there's definitely some projecting from me here, but I'm guessing he does this practicing because of all the times that it didn't work out and he hated it, right? Yeah. And, he would be like starting to go to sleep and then he'd randomly remember that one time. It's like, God, why did I say something so stupid?
I think that's a pretty universal experience.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common experience.
Yeah, because I think the voice still could be not eloquent, basically, while still doing that act, though.
But in my mind, it's something where if there was something that made him insecure about something, then within his own mind, he reinforces himself in some ways in a similar way to his Chunibyo friend of the, within my own head, I at least am master of myself and my destiny, where it's the...
Oh, now I hear the projecting.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah. But I can see how that applies to him as well. Sorry, I totally get what you're saying here, but continue. Yeah.
No, well, and basically so that then he's able to have these monologues and these tirades, right, when he finally opens up, because he's been practicing these kinds of things hours on end. Like it's what his mind is constantly doing while he's not fully engaged in whatever is happening out here.
Yeah, it's a classic. My inner world is so highly active of an introvert, basically, and that's something that I do resonate and connect with in a lot of ways. However, I remember basically the immature side of things there, and that was that in a fear-based kind of response, you don't let other people kind of give their response in the discussion of like what you're talking about.
Sure.
Because you have so much you need to say.
Hence the guy being
I've
like...
literally just done that at times, yeah.
And that's why I think it was so fitting, because he was able to have his tirade against Hayato or whatever his name was.
Right.
And it was quite the tirade. But then at the same time, Hayato's like, where is this coming from?
Right.
Like it's that whole thing of
undue energy.
Yeah. You're going to war when it's like, I thought there wasn't even not even a war, but a battle to be fought, Right. And you're bringing everything to bear.
Again, it's another thing that like Yui was saying about how, you're not necessarily letting anyone in during this
Right.
kind of conversation. That's really more
Vulnerability. Let's see it happen.
Oh, that's not gonna
quickly.
be
Not
anytime
quickly.
soon.
A slow burn. But
Slow
it's going to be a
burn.
great journey to it.
Right, because
Through it.
again, it's not binary. There's soft vulnerability where
Yep.
you kind of get the little moments and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But this is a great episode. Covered a lot of the characters, but really went in depth specifically with Hachiman and then Yui specifically here. So good stuff in that regard. Got to meet Sai. I'm still pretty dead set on the body language, the way of talking, all the specific things to try and basically keep them safe and make everyone basically like them for the purpose of saying yes to their requests and stuff. We'll see where that goes. But this felt like also a pretty kind of closed episode here, in that we've maybe been introduced to all the characters now.
Potentially.
Like maybe.
I could see us maybe getting a fifth.
I
for
feel
that-
like
for
if
that full
anything, that's what
dynamic.
Hayato and Mean Girl and maybe even some
Oh,
other members
sure,
of the
yeah.
squad just
Yeah, that's a
could
good
be,
point. Yep.
Is that Hayato is slowly becoming a character that we're getting to know, and he's not just guy that likes Mean Girl
Right.
or hangs out with her.
And
So,
oh man, if she is the fifth person in the party, like, or her and Hayato, that will be very confusing, because all three of the girls then would have like very similar names. It's like,
Then it has to be. That has to be it.
I mean,
then.
I could see that happening.
Yeah. It's
I could
Yumiko, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yumiko.
Yui, Yukino, and Yumiko.
Oh, that's definitely happening
Like
then.
J.R.R. Tolkien, eat your heart out. Like.
All the,
Oh
like,
my
all the
God.
Hobbit names being so similar.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode's reaction and discussion. If you want to see the next episode's reaction and discussion right now, though, go check out the link in the description below for our Patreon. You can get on early access there. You can watch full-length timer reactions there, and all this comes with Discord access, so you can chat with us and the community there about this show, about anime in general, and you can also talk with Jacob about the sci-fi novel that he wrote.
Yes, I wrote a sci-fi novel. It's called Battle Lines, and it's really cool. And if you want to check it out, it's on Amazon. Links in the description.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, we'll see you there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.